Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, where we take up important articles of the day from the newspaper and discuss them in detail as per the demands of Civil Services exam. Articles covered today are displayed on your screen and their notes in PDF and Word format are provided in the description box down below. Without further ado, let us begin.
Now, before starting off our today's discussion, let me make an announcement. Now, we all know that choosing optional is one of the most critical decisions that we can make in our UPSC journey. As the optional, it is a rank decider and hence it is necessary that we make an informed choice. And in this regard, RAU'S IAS optional faculties, they are conducting an open house session of various optional subjects. As this optional open house is scheduled between September 12th and 21st on 1 pm. Now let us start with the first article of the day, and it appeared in page 4 of today's Hindu newspaper. This article reports that about 2.27 crore people, which include bank and corporate employees, they have registered for reading of the preamble of the Indian Constitution. And this reading, it will take place tomorrow, that is 15th of September at 10 am in the state of Karnataka. Now, this date holds special significance because it is when the International Day of Democracy is celebrated worldwide. Now, the topic of preamble is important from GS Paper 2 perspective, as this syllabus, it highlights Indian Constitution and its features. Further, the topic of preamble, it appeared in mains of the year 2016, where a question asked us to discuss each adjective related to the word republic given in the preamble. Further, in the prelims of the year 2020, a question appeared on preamble and its legal status. Hence, in the scope of our today's discussion on preamble, we will first discuss its key components as well as keywords that are given in the preamble. Moving forward, we will discuss objective that this preamble aims to serve in furthering the harmony in the Indian Republic. Before concluding the discussion, we will discuss the legal status of preamble, especially with respect to Supreme Court judgments. Then we will also discuss amendments that were made into the preamble. Hence, let us start off our today's discussion by discussing what are key components and words given in the preamble of our Indian Constitution. Now, the American Constitution, it was the first constitution in the world which began with a preamble. And following this, many countries, which also includes India, it started to follow this same practice. Now, the term preamble, it is referred to an introduction or a preface to the Constitution. Hence, it contains summary or the essence of the Indian Constitution. Now, an eminent jurist, that was N.A. Palkhiwala, he called Indian preamble as an identity card of the Constitution. Hence, Indian preamble, it reveals 4 key ingredients or components. The first is that it determines the source of the authority. As the preamble, it states that the Constitution of India, it derives its authority from the people of India. Further, the preamble, it also describes us the nature of Indian state, as it declares India to be a sovereign, socialist, secular and a democratic republic. Further, the preamble also highlights the objective of the Indian Constitution. As this preamble, it specifies justice, liberty, equality and fraternity as the Constitution's objective. In the end, Constitution also highlights the date of adoption of the Indian Constitution, as it stipulates that November of 26th in the year of 1949 was the date when the Constitution was enacted in India. Now, after we have discussed the key components, let us discuss keywords that are given in the preamble. The first keyword is that it describes the ultimate location of Indian sovereignty. That is, it indicates that the ultimate sovereignty of India, it lies with the people of India. And in this regard, sovereignty means that Indian state is an independent authority and it is not being subjected to control of any external power. Further, the word sovereign that is given in the preamble, it highlights that India is its own independent authority and it is not subjected to any dominion of an external power. Hence, the country's legislature, it has a power to make laws on any subject. Further, the preamble also highlights the socialist nature of Indian economy. As this term, it means an achievement of socialist ends through democratic means. And the preamble, it holds faith in mixed economy where both private as well as public sector coexist side by side. And this term, it was added by the 42nd Amendment Act in the year of 1976. Further, the preamble also highlights that India is secular in nature. And this term, it means that all religion in India, they get equal respect, equal protection and equal support from the state. Also, this term was added by 42nd Amendment of the year of 1976. Additionally, the preamble also highlights the nature of Indian polity, which means that India is a democratic state and the will of people, that is, the people of India, it is expressed through a method of election. Further, the preamble also indicates that India is a republic country, which means that the head of state in India is an elected official. Hence, the President of India is the elected head of the Indian state. Now, after we have discussed the key components and keywords, let us discuss the objective that the preamble aims to serve as a part of Indian Constitution. Now, as we know that Constitution of India is a supreme law of the land and it helps to maintain integrity in the society by promoting unity among the citizens of the country. Hence, the main objective of Indian Constitution is to promote harmony throughout the nation. And there are many factors that help achieve this promotion of harmony. The first factor is the term justice. Now, the Indian Constitution, it takes a wide interpretation of the term justice. And this justice, it is necessary to maintain order in the Indian society as it is promised by various provisions of the Indian Constitution such as fundamental right and directive principles of state policy. Now this justice, it comprises of three elements. The first is that Indian Constitution aims to provide social justice, which means that the Constitution, it wants to create a society without any discrimination, which may be on the grounds of caste, creed, gender, religion, etc. Further, the Constitution also intends to provide economic justice, and this means that there should be no discrimination on people of India on the basis of their wealth, income, and economic status. Hence, we can say that every person in India must be paid equally for equal position, and all people, they must get opportunities to earn their living. Further, the preamble also provides for political justice, which means that all people, they have an equal, free and fair right without any discrimination to participate in political opportunities. Also, additionally, the preamble also highlights the need for equality. And the term equality, it means that no section of society should have any privileges, which means that everyone in India is equal before the eyes of law. And that all people, they must be given equal opportunities for everything without any discrimination. Also, the preamble highlights the need for liberty. And this term liberty, it means that people of India, they have a freedom to choose their way of life, have any political view, or they can exhibit any behavior in the Indian society. However, it must be noted that liberty in India is subjected to limits that are set by any law. Hence, liberty does not mean freedom to do anything, and a person is subjected to the limits that are laid by a law. In the end, the preamble it also highlights the need to have fraternity. And this term fraternity, it means feeling of brotherhood and an emotional attachment with the country as well as all people. Hence, we can say that fraternity it helps in promoting the dignity of the individual as well as helps promote unity in the Indian nation. Now, after we have discussed the objective that the preamble intends to serve, let us discuss the legal status of preamble in the next slide. Now, whether the preamble is a part of constitution or not, it has been discussed several times in the Supreme Court of India. Now, what is the legal status of Indian preamble? It can be judged by the reading of two cases. The first case is that of Berubadi Union case. And in this case, a reference was made to the Supreme Court under Article 143, and it was related to implementation of an Indo-Pakistan agreement relating to exchange of enclaves in the Berubadi Union. And in this case, a judgment was delivered by Supreme Court bench comprising of 8 judges. And in this case, the Supreme Court highlighted that preamble is a key to open mind of the makers of Indian Constitution. However, the Supreme Court also held that preamble it cannot be considered as a part of Indian Constitution. Therefore, preamble was not enforceable by any law. However, in Keshwananda Bharti case, a judgment was delivered by 13 judges of Supreme Court. And in this case, the Supreme Court rejected the earlier opinion of Berubadi Union judgment. And it observed that preamble is of extreme importance. And in this regard, the Constitution of India it should be read and interpreted in the light of grand and noble vision which is expressed in the preamble. Hence, the Supreme Court held that preamble is an integral part of the Indian Constitution. Further, in the year of 1995, Supreme Court delivered the judgment in Union Government versus LIC of India case. And once again, the Supreme Court highlighted that preamble is an integral part of the Constitution. However, it is not directly enforceable in any court of justice in India. Hence, we can say two things about Indian preamble. While preamble is an integral part of the Indian Constitution, it is neither a source of power to legislature nor it prohibits any power of Indian legislatures. Further, Indian Constitution is also not justiciable, which means that provisions of the preamble they are not enforceable in any court. Now, after we have discussed the legal status of preamble, that it is a part of the Indian Constitution, let us discuss the number of times that the preamble was amended. Now, the preamble, it was only amended once. That was in the year of 1976 by 42nd Amendment Act. Now, as we know that preamble is a part of Indian Constitution. Hence, preamble it can be amended under Article 368 of the Constitution. Hence, in the year of 1976, the preamble was amended, and hence the terms socialist, secular, and integrity was added to the preamble by this very amendment. Hence, it can definitely be said that preamble remains a part of the Indian Constitution. However, it is not a source of a power and also it is not justiciable in any court of law. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on Indian preamble. Now moving on to the next article of the day, which appeared in page 8 of today's Hindu newspaper. Now this article highlights that the world is moving towards sustainable energy options in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that arise out of transport sector. Now, electrification is seen as a major way out in order to reduce this greenhouse gas emissions. Now, biofuels, on the other hand, they can be used on existing engines as well as utilize existing infrastructure with little to no modification. Hence, it can significantly reduce our import dependence on fossil fuels. Now, the term biofuel is a blanket term, and in the scope of our today's discussion, we will discuss ethanol blending of petrols. Hence, this topic is important from GS Paper 3 perspective, as the syllabus highlights infrastructure and energy. Further, a question appeared in mains of the year 2020 on key features of National Clean Air Program. And ethanol blending is seen as a way to reduce the pollution that are prevalent in Indian cities. Further, a question directly appeared in prelims of the year of 2017 on algal based biofuels. Hence, in the scope of our today's discussion, we will first describe what is an ethanol blending program. Further, we will also discuss policies as well as schemes that are taken by Government of India in order to promote this ethanol blending of petrols. Further in the discussion, we will also discuss the constraints that the government is facing in order to promote the ethanol blending as well as promote its use in the transportation sector. Before concluding this discussion, we will take a suggestive way forward in order to understand what needs to be done for furthering the use of biofuels in the country. Hence, let us start off our today's discussion by discussing what is ethanol blending. Now, an ethanol blended fuel, it means that a motor fuel which consists mainly of petrol, it is blended with ethanol, and this ethanol should be at least 99% pure. Now, the ethanol which is required for blending of fuel, it is derived from four different sources. The first is called first generation biofuels, as these biofuels, they are generated from edible biomasses such as sugar beet, sugarcane, wheat, corn or oil crops. While on the other hand, the second generation of biofuels, they are derived from non-edible biomasses, and they can be wood, grass, straw or solid wastes. Further, the third generation of biofuels, they are derived from algal biomasses, which include macroalgae as well as microalgae. While in the end, the fourth generation of biofuels, they are derived from breakthrough technologies such as pyrolysis, solar to fuel conversion, as well as genetically modified organisms. Now you will ask, why is there a need for ethanol blending? It is because there are several benefits associated with it. For example, E20, that is a blend of 20% ethanol with 80% of petrol, it leads to reduction of carbon monoxide emissions. For example, it is estimated that use of E20 will reduce 50% carbon monoxide emission in two-wheelers, whereas it will also lead to 30% reduction in carbon monoxide emission in four-wheelers. And this reduction is compared to neat petrol, which is E0. Further, the government of India, it has also fixed targets related to use of ethanol blending petrol. Now, under National Policy on Biofuel of the year 2018, India aims to achieve 10% ethanol blending of petrol by the year of 2022, whereas 20% of ethanol blending will be achieved by the year of 2025. And in this regard, India has achieved 10% of ethanol blending target in the month of June 2022, whereas E20 fuel, which is a 20% blend of ethanol, it was launched 2 years ahead of target and will be rolled out across the country in a phase-wise manner. Now, after we've understood what is an ethanol blended fuel, let us understand what are the government schemes as well as policies that favor promotion of ethanol blending. Now, the first governmental scheme and policy which favors ethanol blending in the country is the Ethanol Blending Petrol program. And in this program, oil marketing companies they sell petrol which is blended with ethanol. And in this scheme, financial assistance will be provided to sugar mills and grain based distilleries through interest subvention. Further, there is a scheme called Pradhan Mantri Jwal Indhan Vatavaran Anukul Fasan Avdesh Nivaran Yojana. And this Yojana aims to set up second generation biorefineries for production of ethanol. Further, the government has also reduced the goods and services tax on ethanol, which is meant for ethanol blended with petrol program. And the government it has reduced GST from 18 to 5% on ethanol for EBP program. Further, the government has also notified the use of E12 and E15 ethanols, wherein E12 fuel it envisages 12% ethanol, whereas E15 it envisages 15% of ethanol blending with petrol. Further, the government also amended the Industries Development and Regulation Act of the year 1951. As this amendment, it ensures free movement of ethanol across the country. In the end, flex fuel engines and its components, which means engines that are capable of running ethanol blended fuel, they are included under the production linked incentive scheme of the union government. Now, after we have discussed schemes and policies that favor ethanol blending, let us discuss various constraints that the government faces in promotion of ethanol blending. Now in India, the biofuel it is synonymous with first generation ethanol, and this means that India is currently over reliant on first generational ethanol. As this ethanol it is primarily sourced from food crops, whereas the government has a policy target of achieving 20% of ethanol blending with petrol. And this policy measure it is expected to be met almost entirely by first generational ethanol itself. Whereas the second generation ethanol or 2G ethanol, which is made from crop waste and residues, is unlikely to contribute much in achieving this target of ethanol blending. And this brings several implications on the government. The first implication is that it risks the food security. As currently, this 1G ethanol it is produced by surplus food production in the country, whereas India's crop yield has already stagnated. And due to global warming, it is further expected that the India's crop yield will reduce further. Therefore, our strategy for meeting blending targets will not be enough in light of reduced food production. Hence, this will further endanger our nation's food security. Additionally, over reliance on food crops for generation of ethanol also has led to significant groundwater depletion. As a recent study, it projected that the rate of groundwater depletion in the country will increase by 3 times. And this again is attributable to rise in temperatures as well as resulted increase in crop water requirements. Hence, with such limited sources, be groundwater, food production needs to be prioritized over the production of ethanol. Further, agriculture sector is one of the largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the country. And with increasing use of food products to manufacture ethanol will further increase the greenhouse gas emission of the agriculture sector. So, the increasing greenhouse emission from agriculture in order to produce motor fuel is not a reliable alternative. Further, there are production related constraints as well. For example, the prices of ethanol in the country are currently higher. As the ethanol producers, they need to source raw materials at statutory fixed price, and hence it increases the cost of production of ethanol in the country. Further, there is also a lack of ethanol production facilities in the country, and with delays in environmental clearance, the ethanol production targets will be difficult to be achieved. Further, there is limited private sector participation in production of ethanol in the country, and this has led to limitation in increasing the production of ethanol overall India. Further, there are also transport, storage and usage related constraints. For example, India currently witnesses non-uniform availability of ethanol across the states for blending purposes. And this is further aggravated by increased implementation cost, which might be related to construction of storage tanks, ethanol complaint dispensing units, or calibration of nozzles of engines. Further, to run ethanol blended fuel in an engine, it requires modification on the company's part, which further adds to the cost of vehicles. Hence, it discourages the adoption of ethanol blended fuel for transportation purposes. Now, after we have discussed the constraints that the ethanol blending faces, let us discuss a suggestive way forward so as to what needs to be done to further promote ethanol blending of fossil fuels in the country. Now, there are many measures that needs to be undertaken in order to promote ethanol blending. And in this regard, Energy Transition Commission, it recommended that biofuels, it should be prioritized for use in sectors where there is limited low carbon alternatives. For example, in long haul aviation as well as freight road segment, wherein complete electrification will take longer to achieve, these sectors can be encouraged for use of ethanol blended fuels. Further, there is also a need to ensure uniform availability of ethanol blends across the country. And this can be done by incentivizing the development of advanced generational biofuels such as second generation or above fuels. Further, there is also a need to augment infrastructure of oil marketing companies, that is, constructing ethanol storage, handling, blending, and dispensing infrastructures. Further, there should be a focus on ensuring sustainability of supplies by improving plant biomass, overcoming interstate movement issues, as well as expediting the regulatory clearances which should be done for new production units. And further, there is a need to support sugar mills with cash support, which will encourage them to increase their bioethanol production. Further, there is a need to provide tax incentives which will help absorb R&D cost, and it will make engines more compatible with E20 blended fuels. Hence, by promoting the use of ethanol blending in sectors which has limited low carbon alternatives, ensuring uniform availability of ethanol blends, augmenting infrastructure of oil marketing companies, focusing on sustainability of supplies, and providing tax incentives to absorb R&D cost will further the use of ethanol blending in the country. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on ethanol blending. Now moving on to the next article of the day, which appeared in page 14 of today's Hindu newspaper. Now the President of India, she virtually launched an Ayushman Bhav health campaign and its portal on Wednesday. And this historic launch of the campaign and its portal, it marks a significant leap towards achieving the universal health coverage in the country, as it ensures healthcare for all and it further consolidates the accessibility and affordability of health services, particularly for the unserved section of the population. And in this regard, universal health coverage is the topic of our today's discussion, as this topic is important from GS paper 2 perspective, which highlights issues relating to development and management of social sector and services. Further, a question on universal health coverage, it appeared in mains of the year 2015. And in the prelims of the year 2022, a question appeared on Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, which furthers the achieving of universal health coverage in the country. Hence, in the scope of our today's discussion, we will first discuss what is a universal health coverage as well as its significant benefits on the population of our country. Then we will discuss initiatives that are taken by Government of India in order to move towards universal health coverage in the country, followed by challenges that the government faces in order to make access to healthcare services in a more universal manner. Further, we will also discuss a suggestive way ahead which will suggest measures in order to improve access and affordability of healthcare services in the country. Hence, let us start our today's discussion by discussing what is a universal healthcare coverage as well as its benefits. Now, according to World Health Organization, a universal health coverage means that people they have access to healthcare services that they need, and it also highlights when and where they need this service from without facing any financial hardship. Thus, we can say that universal health coverage it facilitates people's enforcement to right to health. Now, there are several benefits of universal healthcare coverage. For example, a universal healthcare coverage it can generate economic returns, which is at least 10 times more than their initial investments. As due to investment in people healthcare initiatives, we can generate significant economic outcomes such as reduced labor absence and improvement in skilling of labor force. Further, universal healthcare it also enhances communities' resilience by reducing susceptibility of population to infectious diseases as well as microbial resistance. Further, universal healthcare can also reduce poverty and inequality in the population as it reduces the out of pocket expenditure that are undertaken by people on their healthcare services. Further, universal healthcare it can also improve opportunities for the population specifically with respect to poor, women and other vulnerable section of the society. As these vulnerable section they are more susceptible for healthcare ailments. Hence, providing access to healthcare services to these sections will help them enjoy better health, which will further lead to improved economic opportunities. In the end, universal healthcare it can also help improve our nation's demographic dividend as it will help produce healthy workforce in the country. Now, after we have discussed the benefits of universal healthcare coverage, let us understand what are the initiatives that are taken by Government of India in order to move towards universal healthcare coverage. The first initiative in this regard is that the government enacted the National Healthcare Policy in the year of 2017. As this policy, it provides for universal healthcare coverage and asks us to raise the public financing of healthcare sector up till 2.5% of its GDP by the year of 2025. Additionally, the government also brought forward the Ayushman Bharat scheme, and this scheme was launched in the year of 2018, which helps us to achieve the vision of universal healthcare. As this scheme, it covers 50 crore beneficiaries and provides health insurance to every family up to 5 lakhs rupees per annum. Further, the government has also made rapid strides towards digital healthcare services and telemedicine. As about 70% of nation's population, it is currently residing in rural and remote areas. And these areas, they witness low healthcare facilities. Hence, digital health initiatives as well as telemedicine, it can significantly improve their access to healthcare services. Further, the Supreme Court of India in Bandhua Mukti Morcha versus Union of India case in the year of 1984, it interpreted that the right to health coverage it is covered under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Hence, it should be the duty of the state to implement right to health initiative. Now, after we have discussed various government initiatives for promotion of universal healthcare in the country, let us discuss the challenges that the government currently faces in making the health coverage of the country more universal. Now, there are significant challenges which are associated with provision of healthcare services in the country. The first among which is that there is chronic underfunding on healthcare services in the country. As Indian government, it currently spends about 1.5% of its GDP on healthcare sector, which is very low compared to the large population of India. Further, India also has a weak primary healthcare sector. As about 60% primary healthcare centers in the country, they only have one doctor, while on the other hand, 5% of PHCs they have no doctors. Also, there are regional disparity in accessibility of healthcare services, as about 80% doctors as well as 60% of hospitals they are present only in the urban areas, which caters to only about one third population of the entire country. Further, there has been predominance of private healthcare service providers in the country. As private sector, it caters to about 70% of India's population. And with increased cost of private healthcare sector, it makes access to healthcare services more unaffordable. Further, the government it also neglects tropical diseases, as there is inadequate attention to these neglected tropical diseases by both the government as well as the pharma industry. Further, India also witnesses low insurance penetration, as about 80% of rural and urban population in the country they are not covered under any insurance scheme, which makes them vulnerable for high out of pocket expenditures, further risking their affordability of healthcare services. Additionally, there's also been inadequate infrastructure development with respect to health sector, as currently there are shortage of healthcare workers, hospitals, supply of drugs and medical equipments, etc. And this issue is further compounded by low healthcare awareness, as people currently they lack knowledge regarding breastfeeding practices, benefits of hygiene and sanitation, which further brings them at risk to more vulnerable diseases. Now, after we have discussed challenges that pertains to access of universal healthcare services, let us understand what is the suggestive way ahead in order to make health services more accessible and hereby universal in nature. Now, the first suggestion in this regard is that there is a need to enhance funding on healthcare sector, as the expenditure of the government should at least be 3% of its GDP in order to have a decent healthcare coverage. Further, there should be cooperative federalism in the country, as there is a need to ensure decentralization of power to states, which will be further aided by giving funds to the state by the central government. Also, the government should incentivize wellness seeking behavior in the country, and it should further improve the implementation of Poshan Abhiyan mission as well as Fit India movement. Also, there is a need to bring a comprehensive law for right to health, as this law it will ensure achieving of core components of right to health, such as availability of high quality public healthcare services, improving accessibility and affordability by bringing non-discrimination in healthcare services and effective people-centered and timely policies. Further, digitizing healthcare system will also ensure evidence-based planning and decision making in the country. Towards the end, there are also other initiatives that must be taken by Government of India, and it includes harnessing digital health services for improving access to healthcare services, ensuring effective regulation for the private sector in reducing their unfair practices, and encouraging community to participate in healthcare formulation and implementation policies. Hence, we can say by enhancing the funding on healthcare sector, ensuring cooperative federalism, incentivizing wellness centric behavior, bringing a comprehensive law to ensure right to health services, digitizing healthcare system, improving access to digital health services, regulating private sector as well as ensuring community participation will go a long way forward in ensuring universal healthcare coverage in the country. Hence, this was all for today's discussion on universal health coverage. Now moving on to the last article of the day, which appeared in page 8 of today's Hindu newspaper. Now this editorial, it highlights that Nipah virus is again wreaking havoc on the state of Kerala, as this is the fourth outbreak of the disease in the last 5 years. Now this Nipah virus, it is caused by a zoonotic spillover, which is the transmission of pathogens. It takes place from animals to humans, and the closest reservoir of this Nipah virus are fruit bats. And the research has shown that anthropogenic activities, they have a definite hand to play in zoonotic spillovers. And in this regard, the government needs to mount a strategic effort to control such outbreaks and deaths due to infectious diseases. And it brings us the need to adopt a One Health approach, which is an integrated approach to health to prevent zoonotic spillover. Now this topic of One Health approach is important from GS Paper 2 perspective, as the syllabus highlights issues relating to development and management of social sector services relating to health, education and human resources. Further, topic of infectious diseases and COVID-19 pandemic, it appeared in the mains of the year 2020. Further, in the prelims of the year 2023, a question appeared on India's public healthcare system and the decentralized approach towards healthcare delivery. And in this regard, the topic of our today's discussion is an integrated approach towards healthcare, that is One Health approach. And in the scope of our today's discussion, we will first discuss why is there a need to adopt an integrated approach towards healthcare. Then, we will discuss steps that are taken by Government of India towards achieving an integrated approach, followed by challenges that the government faces in integrating the healthcare services. Towards the end, we will discuss a way forward in order to understand the steps that needs to be undertaken in order to tilt the healthcare services approach towards a more integrated manner. Hence, let us start by understanding why is there a need for integrated approach, also known as One Health approach. Now, driving factors that highlight the need of One Health initiative are many. The first among which is the need to tackle emerging infectious diseases, as 75% of emerging infectious diseases and almost all recent pandemics, they are zoonotic in nature, which means the origin of these infectious disease can be found in animals. Further, 60% of pathogens that cause human diseases, they also originate from animals, which may be both domesticated or from wildlife. Further, 75% of emerging human pathogens, they also have animal origin, whereas 80% of pathogens that can cause bioterrorism, they are also associated with animals. Further, there is a need to prevent negative effect on our environment, as human activities like encroachment into natural habitats or expansion of human population into new geographic areas, it might lead to encounter of humans and livestock with wildlife. And further, it has led to loss of about 25% of total forest area. And human actions, they have severely altered about 75% of terrestrial environments, as well as 66% of all marine environments. Hence, by regulating the extension of human activities, we can create a positive effect on our environment. Further, with rise of urbanization as well as climate change, they are providing new and more suitable conditions for these pathogens and disease in order to develop and spread. Hence, in order to curb the menace of urbanization as well as climate change, One Health approach is needed. Also, there are issues which are related to food security, as currently more than 70% of additional animal protein which will be needed to feed the world by 2015, they come from animal sources. Further, more than 20% of global animal production losses they are linked to animal diseases. And hence, reducing these animal based diseases can help our population improve its food security. Further, improvement of food security will also lead to improvement in health of our agricultural economy. As animal diseases, they pose a direct threat on incomes of our rural communities who depend perpetually on livestock production. And to prevent these livestock from pathogens, we need One Health initiative. Now, after we have discussed the need for One Health initiative, let us discuss the steps that have been undertaken in order to implement One Health approach. The first step is that there has been increase in collaboration between national and state levels. For example, National Influenza Pandemic Committee, it was established in order to control avian influenza, rabies in Tamil Nadu as well as other states. Further, there have been institutional collaboration as well. For example, Indian Council of Medical Research as well as Indian Council for Agricultural Research, they have collaborated for a joint research priorities, which is done in order to control disease outbreaks. Further, One Health Support Unit, it was initiated by the Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairying, which is done in order to develop a national One Health framework which is aimed at improving national and state level resource allocation and policy ecosystem on zoonotic diseases. Additionally, a national mission on biodiversity and human well-being, it was established by Prime Minister's Science and Technology Innovation Advisory Council, also known as PMSTIAC. Further, a One Health project was initiated, which envisaged surveillance of zoonotic as well as transboundary pathogens in India. Towards the end, there is also a regional One Health initiative, which has a special focus on low and middle income countries which are across South as well as Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, after we have discussed steps that were undertaken towards One Health approach, let us discuss the challenges that are there in implementation of One Health approach. The first challenge that is associated with One Health approach is that of siloed approach, as this approach, which has a separate disease surveillance program pertaining to infection in plants, humans and animals. And this siloed approach, it prevents transmission in information which might lead to decreased disease surveillance. Further, there has been lack of communication as well as inadequate data sharing. And this, it limits the opportunities that are there for detecting zoonotic diseases. Spread of COVID-19 pandemic across the world is an example of such a lack of communication. Further, the funding for healthcare systems, they have proven to be inadequate. As currently, the government, it spends about 2.1% of its GDP on healthcare in an entire year. However, this has drastically increased from 1.6% in the financial year of 2021. However, it is still well below considering the huge amount of population that India currently has. Further, there has been limited practical guidance and understanding on how to foster and sustain a cross-sector collaboration. And this cross-sector collaboration is absolutely essential for implementation of One Health initiative. Additionally, there have been limited awareness among common people, which limits their cooperation as well as active engagement with healthcare professionals. And this negatively affects the amount of surveillance that the government can get out of such population. Further, professionals in India who work in healthcare systems, they face lack of required training. And this lack of training is particularly associated with rise of infectious diseases. However, despite several challenges, there are few suggestions that can be inculcated in order to implement One Health initiative in a more comprehensive manner. The first suggestion, it requires operationalizing a 3C approach, which requires improving coordination, communication, as well as collaboration between sectors, which may be reinforced by sustained capacity strengthening. Further, this requires a shift from largely vertical programs which are focused on specific diseases. And this can be done by strengthening overall systems of our country, which will enable better collaboration across sectors. Further, there's an imperative need to develop databases and models, which will help in a consolidated approach, which can further involve ecologists, field biologists, epidemiologists, and other scientists as well. Further, there's a need to develop strong nexus between sciences, social sciences, as well as indigenous knowledge. And it can be done at both national, state, as well as local levels of our government system. Further, there's a need to integrate One Health approach in pandemic prevention plans. As such plans, as it will help improve our pandemic management, which will further reduce the amount of mortality that are associated with pandemics. Hence, by undertaking a 3C approach of coordination, communication, and collaboration, strengthening overall systems, developing database and models, improving nexus among sciences, as well as collaboration among governments, and integrating One Health approach in pandemic plans will help improve our implementation of One Health initiative in healthcare system of our country. Now, this was all for today's discussion on One Health approach.